You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today is part one of a series I'm doing for June 2026, all about some of the many questions that daughters-in-law ask themselves regarding the relationship they have with their toxic in-laws. And today's topic is all about the question, am I the problem? Are you a Catholic wife who's grappling with challenging in-laws? If so, you've found your sanctuary here. Welcome to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast, a place where we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on, and you finally get the validation you've been seeking. I'm your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife and convert who's weathered nearly 3 decades of in-law drama. But before we dive in, let me just share this quick message. This podcast is my own personal journey and is not an official ministry or apostolate of the Catholic Church or of any diocese. I have no ecclesiastical authority. I am simply one woman with one story, taking it one day at a time, walking alongside you. Hi, I'm Miriam Susan. Like I said in the intro, welcome to this month's series of podcast episodes all about these questions that a lot of my community members, my coaching clients, people who listen to my podcast ask me. And today's topic is all about the question, am I the problem? So before we begin, you may have noticed that I have a new disclaimer in my intro, and that is after I watched something from a fellow Catholic podcast creator, Catholic content creator, who wanted to make sure that we as Catholics make sure that we are clear about our ministries. And so I just wanted to make absolutely clear that this podcast is basically just my story. I'm not officially sanctioned by the church, by any diocese, and it's basically just me as a Catholic laywoman sharing my story with you, because I know that there's just not anything really out there that addresses the issues that we uniquely face as Catholic daughters-in-law with toxic in-laws. There's a lot of content about romantic relationships, about even about relationships with our own parents, but there's a different dynamic that happens when you are the daughter-in-law and it's not your parents that you have issues with. All that being said, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And for all my other ones, none of them are sanctioned. They're all my own personal ministry. But I just wanted to let you know why I have this new intro, why I have this new disclaimer, because I just want to be absolutely clear in case I, somewhere along the way, say or share things that don't perfectly align with the Catholic Church's teaching. Please always go back and check whatever I say against the scriptures, against the catechism, against counsel that you can get from a really solid priest. Let's go ahead and start with today's episode. So the scripture reference for today is from the Gospel according to St. John, chapter 3, verse 20. And this is from my favorite edition of the Bible, the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic edition. And it says, "For all who do evil hate the light and do not come to the light, so that their deeds may not be exposed." And oh my goodness, this really hits home for what I've seen with my own relationship with my in-laws, is how they like to have this public persona that is very different, that is very wholesome, very godly, but then in the dark, away from the light, behind closed doors, behind the keyboard, they are very different people, or behind courtroom doors. So let's go ahead and jump into this idea of, are you the problem? And I think any good Catholic woman, any good Catholic period, when they have tension within a relationship, they are going to step back and ask, am I the problem? Am I the one who is causing all this tension? Is the source from me? And this may be a question that that you ask because you have been asked, either indirectly or directly, to keep the peace for your whole marriage or the whole relationship that you've had with your now husband. And perhaps lately something has shifted and you have begun, maybe because you're listening to my podcast, maybe because other things are coming up into your feed on social media, and something has happened and now you're starting to notice the patterns of behavior. You are starting to name certain behaviors and maybe even have had the courage to kind of push back on some of these boundaries that your in-laws are violating. And now you are the difficult one. Now you are labeled as the source of all drama and trauma and chaos in your family. And the question that you probably are coming back to is, am I the problem? Is it my fault? So I want to pose this counter question to that question of, am I the problem? And say, what if that you asking that question is actually a sign of you being a healthy one and not one of guilt? So why do my listeners, my community members, my coaching clients, why do you even ask yourself this question? So I want to propose something to you. Women who have healthy relationships, healthy family cultures, healthy family systems, they're not usually the ones that are walking around wondering if they are the problem. I just want to let that kind of hang there because, with my relationship with my parents, I've never thought that. I've never thought I am the source of any problems within the relationship between me and my parents because there's just not really problems. So the fact that you are asking, am I the problem, means that somebody directly or indirectly has suggested that you are the problem. And that's worth pondering and thinking about and asking yourself, well, where did this idea come from that I am the problem? So chances are, if this has been presented to you, either directly by your in-laws saying, well, ever since you came into the family, there's been all this drama. We never had it before. All of a sudden, our son has changed. He's a different person now than before you met him and started dating him and got married. That's a sign that you are probably becoming the family scapegoat. Now, back in history, the scapegoat was the sacrificial animal that all of the sins of the community were placed on, and then that animal was sacrificed to atone for the sins of the whole entire community. Now, or it was a animal that the sins were cast on that animal, and then the goat was exiled, like they shoot it out of the community. I don't know exactly how they did it, but the goat was no longer part of that community. It was pushed out and never seen from again, probably attacked by bears or wolves, whatever. But if you have been asking yourself this question and you start to realize that maybe it's because either your in-laws are saying it directly to you, or it's coming maybe through your husband or through other siblings or cousins or aunts or uncles or whatever, and they're saying that, why can't you just get along with mom? Why can't you just get along with dad? Like, this is just how she is. You just got to love them anyway. Those kinds of things. But you become the scapegoat when you start pushing back, when you start noticing things, or maybe you just come in and you're just you. Like, this is what happened to me. I didn't come in and decide that I was just going to stir the pot. I didn't decide that I was just going to come in and rock the boat. I was just being me. And unfortunately, just being me meant that I was an easy target to be the scapegoat because my husband and I are a team. Shocker. And when things were presented to us by my in-laws that we as a team did not want to go along with, then guess who got the blame? It was me. Now things have shifted and now my husband is the scapegoat, which is always fun because the scapegoat's role can switch from person to person depending on whatever the circumstances are at the time. But basically the scapegoat ends up being the person who gets blamed for exposing things that the rest of the family culture or most of the family culture wants kept on the down low. They want to keep in the dark. They want to be kept quiet. So to address why you're asking this question, you did not create the dysfunction. You just, maybe, like me, you were the first one that stopped pretending that it isn't there. And that can ruffle a lot of feathers. That can cause a lot of drama. And then you end up with the target on your back. So when we go back to this scripture talking about light and darkness from the gospel according to St. John back in chapter 3, having something in the light, when someone starts seeing things clearly, those who are really invested in things staying in the dark will resist, fight back against, and detest the light. Even if what you're saying is 100% true. That's how it works. If you are so much in this family culture that values these things staying in the dark, when you bring in that candle, when you bring in that flashlight, when you turn on the lights, they don't like it. And you become the problem. And they're going to fight back against it. Because a lot of times what these cultures, these family cultures that are very dysfunctional do is it's very focused on self-preservation. And when you bring things to light, it really puts people on the defensive, because then it means if they go ahead and accept what you're saying is true, it means that everything that they have believed about the family culture is now not true. And sometimes that is impossible for people to let go of. And so they will resist when you start shining a light on things that are dysfunctional, that are not healthy, that maybe are quite toxic. The messenger is the one that gets really destroyed. So your awakening to these unhealthy patterns is very, very threatening to the people who need, for whatever reason, those patterns to continue. The golden child is going to want to stay the golden child. Nobody who is the golden child really wants to not be it unless they become aware of how toxic being the golden child actually is. And people who are, okay, let me give you an example. So my husband spent many, many times trying to talk to his dad about what he was experiencing with his mom. From the time that he was very young, he remembers being in middle school and talking to his dad about feeling like his mom was trying to brainwash him. But here's the thing. When you have the other spouse, so my husband talking to his dad about his mom, when you have that other spouse involved, there's a lot at stake for that other spouse. If you just have one toxic in-law, if they go along with your version of the story, because now they're the spouse. The spouse and his spouse, the couple, the parents, they're one. That's how marriage is created. Man and woman become one in marriage. And so now if you have one of those partners in this pair that is one, who is now siding, because it's always about sides with toxic people, now siding with a child, well, that other parent is going to have, you know what, to pay for all of this going on. And they will have a different version of the toxic one coming after them for not being on their side, not being together. Maybe they'll have divorce threatened against them, their reputation, all kinds of things. And so these people who buy into these toxic systems very much tend to want it to stay the same. Because if not, then it means their whole world has to shift, has to change. And a lot of people just aren't willing to do that. So it's very common, and I'm getting off on a tangent and I know it, but it's very common for these situations where you have parents that are married and one of them is toxic, one of them is not, that you end up losing the relationship with both. Because the one, the spouse is not going to turn on the other spouse. For whatever reason, for whatever dysfunctional reason, there's something in it for them to stay with the toxic one. And so then you kind of end up feeling like you've lost both parents. All right. Got off on a little tangent there, but let me get back to, why the light is so threatening to these cultures. So when you become aware of these unhealthy patterns and it becomes threatening to the people who are very invested in keeping it, the status quo, you're suddenly the bad guy. And it's not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped going along with this culture that is headed this direction, right? You stopped going along with something that's always been wrong. But because so many people are so invested in it going this way, that if you start turning off to the right or to the left, you're going to be the bad guy because you're messing things up. You're not doing things the way they were always going to be until you came along. Now, the scapegoat role isn't given to you because you are the most broken. It's not because you have the most sin in the family when it comes to this toxic dynamic. It's given to you, it's placed on you because you are the most aware of what is going on. And, this doesn't mean that as we walk along this journey with toxic in-laws or toxic parents, it doesn't mean that we have to do everything perfectly or that we've handled everything perfectly and done everything in a perfect way. But even if you haven't, your imperfections are not the issue. It's not the issue that maybe one time you snapped at your father-in-law because of how he was treating your child. They will bring it back to that, and they will make it seem like it was that one incident that has caused all this chaos in the family. But it's because they're just zeroing in on your imperfections. But that's not the reason why you are the scapegoat. It's because you've noticed things that are going on, and you're just done with them being in the dark. Even if you're not aware. Like I said, I was not the person that came into this family that I married into to be the person who ruffled all the feathers. I was just being me. And just being me, honest, independent, it did not go with the flow that my in-laws saw their future would be with their future daughter-in-law and subsequent grandchildren. So chances are you're never going to get any kind of admission from your in-laws that you are not the problem. So you can let go of that. It's not going to come because toxic people don't admit that there's anything wrong with them and their behaviors. They might say, oh, well, we're all, I'm just a sinner and I sin. But so it'll be like general. Or, oh, everybody makes mistakes. Oh, everybody loses it every once in a while. It'll be statements like that maybe kind of sort of seem like they're taking a little bit of the responsibility of what's going on, but really that's not going to happen, that they're going to say, you know what, it's really not your fault. It's really, the way we have our family, the way our culture is in our family, that's why things are the way. No, that's very, very unlikely to happen. So you might never get that admission that you're not the problem, but you can stop feeling the need to get it. So many of us in these situations feel like we are owed an apology. And a lot of times we very much are for things that have happened. But that apology is not going to come. And we need to prayerfully make peace with that and realize that even though you've approached somebody in love, even though you have approached somebody in the most charitable and kind way and gentle way possible to try to work things out, have a long sit-down talk that went nowhere, you can still hope for that, but not hopelessly hope for that. Because chances are it's just not going to happen. If you've approached somebody over and over and over again, we're talking about patterns here, over and over and over again, bringing up your grievances, bringing up the hurts, bringing up the issues that have come up between you and your in-laws, and they have regularly dismissed, pushed things back on you. You can get to the point where you realize that it's never going to happen. You're never going to get that I'm sorry. You're never going to get the apology. You're never going to get the repentance, the reconciliation that you hoped for, and be okay. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of prayer. But it's basically allowing those other people to stop controlling you in that way. Because when you're waiting constantly to be vindicated, to be told you're not the scapegoat, it's not your fault, this is just how our family is. If you can learn how to let go of that need for the reconciliation, repentance and reconciliation, that forgiveness to come, then you will have peace. It's sometimes when we continue chasing this thing that's never going to come, that is what really robs us of a sense of peace. It's because, it's like expecting to get milk from anything other than a cow or a goat or a camel if you live in the Middle East. You're just not going to get it, or a sheep. If you expect to get milk from a tree, and I'm not talking about almond milk, that is not milk, it's not going to happen. And that's kind of the situation where those of us who have waited for years to get some acknowledgement, to get that apology, we have to realize it's just not going to happen. Not without God's miraculous intervention. We can learn to accept it, and then if it does come, rejoice. If it does come and your toxic in-laws or your toxic parents, whoever it is in your extended family, all of a sudden has this miraculous change, and they genuinely come to you and they say, I'm so sorry for all that I've put you through. I'm sorry for the lying. I'm sorry for the slander. I'm sorry for how I undermined your authority as a parent to your children. I'm sorry that I, deliberately tried to create a wedge between you and your children. I'm so sorry. I'm working on changing my ways. I'm doing everything I can to not let that happen anymore. Please forgive me. That's different. It's not likely going to happen. So you can start to try to find peace with knowing that it probably will never happen. But then if it does, you can rejoice and still forgive them, still be guarded and exercise some wisdom and discernment as to whether you want to jump right back into a relationship with that person if that does happen. But chances are it probably won't. And you have to remember that you are not the problem. Again, this whole topic today is all about, am I the problem? We have to realize that the clarity that you gained that made you that target is very similar, if not the same, clarity that is going to set you free and bring you peace. So asking yourself, am I the problem? It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign that you are the problem, because people who are the problem rarely ask if they are the problem. It's not weakness. It's not a character fault. What it is the beginning of you seeing the whole relationship, the whole extended family, the whole family culture much more clearly. So if you have resonated with this, if you are one of those women who have been asking, am I the problem? I want you to consider this your invitation to join a group of women who also are asking themselves, am I the problem? We're a bunch of problem women in my group over at toxicinlaws.com. We are women who have asked that question, am I the problem? We have, been the ones that have done the self-reflection and tried to see, where did I ruin this family? And started to realize, no, there's really some really messed up patterns that are going on here. And why am I the only one that's seeing it? Those are your fellow community members over at toxicinlaws.com. It is a free community to join. We do have a paid upgrade if you wish to dive deeper into some certain topics like legal protection, online privacy, how to handle the holidays, dealing with boundaries, self-care, all kinds of different topics at the paid level. But like I said, the community part is absolutely free, and I would love to have you in there to get the support that you need and just to feel validated and realize, no, I'm not the problem. There's a whole bunch of other women who are going through eerily similar things as I am, and I am trying to do my best to live a life that is pleasing to the Lord, that demonstrates my Catholic faith in the best way possible. And I know that I'm not perfect, but I'm also not the problem. God bless you. Go in peace. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.